Hello and welcome everyone to episode 11 of Mission Apollo, the official Apollo Scooters podcast. I'm joined today by a new guest who's been working with us for a little over 8 months now as one of our expert scooter whisperers, helping to keep all our machines running smoothly. Now, his background is actually in sound engineering, and while our scooters may not make music, he sure plays them like a fiddle. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Hey, Sean, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you, and I'll start off with just a quick question. What did one wheel say to the other?
Oh, that's what did one wheel say to the other?
I feel like my life is just going around in circles.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads me to today's podcast, tires. Yes, that tire topic of tubular travel is a source of frustration and confusion for a lot of you, but we're here to help keep your bearings and stay upright. Now, you've probably changed hundreds of tires already in your time here at Apollo, and so we figured you were the best person to talk about this.
Flat tires are certainly one of our main cause of concerns for customers, and one of the main reasons we have scooters coming in, especially local riders here in Montreal. It's very doable to fix it yourself, so we try to have all the information and tools necessary out there. So if a customer wants to try to fix their own flat, have all the tools they need. But local riders often prefer just to drop it off with us, and then couple days later they come pick it back up, bing bang boom, it's all good.
And that is one of the, I guess, main frustrations with owning a scooter and not having maybe a lot of repair shops everywhere yet. I mean, we have our repair videos that help walk people through the process of changing tire for themselves. But the main question I think everyone is asking is, why am I getting so many flats? So what are some of the leading causes of punctures, you think?
I'd say the biggest reason people get flats more than anything is that they're not actually checking their tire pressure. A scooter is not quite the same as a car, where most people who drive a car, they probably don't even check their tire pressure, even though they probably should. Or if you are like us living here in Montreal, the tire pressure gets checked when you change it for the season, right? When you put on winter tires, they're checked at the right PSI, and when you put on your all seasons again, they're put at the right PSI. But a lot of people get their scooter and don't think it requires any user maintenance at all, and they'll never check it. So as the tire pressure gets lower and lower, what ends up happening is the tire rides starts to sink in, and more of the inner tube on the inside of it has contact with the ground. And so any little sharp rock, or if there's glass, or Lord knows what else people might be riding over in the city, especially Montreal, potholes, that would be the leading cause of flats for sure.
Okay, so underinflation, then you're saying?
Yeah, I would say underinflation, and alternatively, some people overinflate their tires. Also not a good thing, although that is less of a common problem. Most people who are inflating their tires are, more savvy about what they are doing and what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. So what would be the recommended PSI then, tire pressure for our scooters, and I guess maybe most?
So I can't speak for every electric scooter on the market by any means, but for all Apollo scooters, except for the Air models, except for the Air Base and the Air Pro, our recommended PSI is 50 PSI. And for the Airs, it is 36 PSI. The exception to that is the rear wheel of the Air Base is actually an 8.5-inch tire, not a 10-inch tire like the front wheel. And that rear wheel of the Base, we recommend 50 PSI as well. So It's pretty easy to remember. If you have anything that isn't an Air, 50 PSI, Phantom, Ghost, Explorer, City, Light, 50 PSI, and just the Airs are slightly different at 36.
Right. And if anyone's ever not sure, they can always read it on the side of the tire, right? It's printed on the wall of the tire.
The wall of the tire actually doesn't have our recommended PSI. What the wall of the tire will have is the max load at a certain PSI. I have a tire right here. I can show you even. I have to look at my camera to make sure you can see this.
I don't know if it'll show up. Yeah.
So you can see max load 77 kg at 310 kPa, which is kilopascals. Pascals is just a metric unit for pressure, essentially. In North America, we pretty much use PSI. It's one of those funny things Canadians do, where we use the metric system except for certain things, arbitrarily.
For, everything else, yeah. That's a topic in itself.
So what that's saying is 77 kilograms is about 170 pounds. And that's saying the maximum that this tire will hold is 170 pounds at 45 psi is what the kilopascals roughly translate to.
Okay,
Don't worry though,
I
I know that sounds bad because a lot of people are over 170 pounds, myself included, and ride scooters. But remember, there are two wheels on a scooter, so you're dividing that in half basically.
Okay.
So there's
I
not a
see.
lot of worry about overloading these tires.
Right. Okay. And simple answer then, I guess, 50 psi for everything but the Air and Air Pro.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. And what are some signs of a damaged tire? Like when should people be changing them? If they get a puncture, do they need to be changing the tire all the time?
For the most part, the tires are very strong and very sturdy, right? Because of the design of the tires on our Apollo scooters, which is a pneumatic tire with an inner tube, right? And we can get into different types of tires shortly.
Yeah.
Because of that design, the tires are really strong. Most of the time, you don't need to replace your tire. We get a lot of scooters come in, they say, I have a flat tire, I need a new inner tube and a new tire. Most of the time, it's just the inner tube that's been pierced and just needs to be changed. The tire, 95% of the time, is okay. Mostly, it's just your regular wear and tear after you ride your scooter for 1 year, 2 years. If the tread is worn down, that's when you really want to start looking at getting your tires replaced. But it's not something that needs to be changed as often as, say, brake pads or something like that.
If you had to put a number to maybe the mileage that you would expect most tires to get, like what can people expect? And yeah, when did you recommend people actually change their tires? And what's the sign of a damaged tire?
So the sign, okay, first I'm going to split between worn tires and damaged tires, right? There's a big difference. A damaged tire will have damage to the structural integrity of the tire. On the sidewall, so right, you have the main tread part, but this part here called the sidewall, that is sort of in between the rubber is a steel or metal weaving, right? And that helps keep its form. And if you get into a bad crash or if you scrape the side of a curb very badly, it's possible that your sidewall will be gashed in and you can see little metal. They're not thick at all. They almost look hair thin. And you can see them. If you see exposed metal in your tire, new tire. Your tire's done. Don't try riding on it. You'll only blow your inner tube and, get stuck 3 kilometers from your home and have to order an Uber back.
Yeah, it's never fun.
So the wear, if you don't have actual damage to your tire, the tires can go. I mean, it depends on your personal riding style and where you ride, whether you're on smooth road or gravel roads or rough terrain. But I want to say on average, you can go 1,000 kilometers on a set of tires that come with your Apollo scooter. They're built well. The easiest way to see on most of our models, you'll see a red line, right? On this one, you can see it even deep into the tread. And over time, you'll see that red line fade. If the red line's completely disappeared, it's a safe bet to get a tire, but it's not strictly urgent. You're probably safe to ride as long as you're riding on paved streets and smooth roads. Nothing, no off-roading, no rocky terrain.
Of course.
So yeah, I'd say on average 1,000 kilometers. But I have seen people come in with 2,000 kilometers on a scooter, and their tires look like they're in great shape. So it is possible. There's lots of variables. So yeah.
So it all comes down, I guess, to like riding style, riding conditions, and stuff like that.
Definitely. There's so many variables when it comes to how fast you wear down your tires, even to things that you can't really control, like your weight, where you live, right, where you drive your scooter. Some people I know live down big dirt driveways, and so they have a kilometer or 2 long driveway that they got to go down every time they take their scooter anywhere. Some people live in a newly paved subdivision in the suburbs, and everything is super smooth and there's no trouble, and your scooters your tires will last forever almost on those. The other thing that actually plays into it, which is interesting, is how you brake, which is not something that a lot of people would realize. But
Yeah.
essentially, if you ride your brakes really hard, you're going to wear your tires out faster, because what's happening is,
Okay.
your tire's spinning.
Mhm.
I hope everyone likes this visual. Your tire's spinning, and if you slam on your brakes really hard, you're locking the tire in space. But then there will be a certain amount of distance, say probably a meter or less, where your tire's
Yeah.
just dragging right on the ground, and so
Yeah.
that obviously causes more wear, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you brake slower, then that doesn't happen as much. So there's just
Of
a lot
course.
of different things to consider when talking about tire wear. But I still think it's pretty safe to say you can expect 1,000 kilometers out of a set of
Yeah.
tires.
Yeah, and people always think it's fun to, do a braking skid or, burn a little
Yeah,
bit of rubber when
do
they're taking off,
do
and
the
it may be
burnouts.
fun, but
Hmm.
it's not good for your tires, obviously.
Not
And
not recommended. No.
yeah, it's funny though, because some people will come out and say to us like, "Yeah, I'm getting a flat tire. It seems all the time," and other people, I don't know, we never hear from them. I mean, they never seem to get flat. So it
Yeah,
really depends on a lot of different factors.
there's so many variables. I've had people come in, locals here, and say, "Hey, I've had 3 flat tires in 2 weeks," and I'll look at them and
Mm,
say, "I've been riding my scooter back and forth from work for 5 months. I've never had a flat tire." So,
yeah.
and I mean, I ride not super aggressively, but I ride fast when
Hmm.
I can. And
Yeah.
I would ride through downtown Montreal. And if you're familiar with those roads, they are not smooth, easy to ride on roads, right? There are lots of
Yeah.
lots of potholes, lots of you know, not smoothness to watch out for. Uh,
Yeah,
so
I think
really,
we've
it's
mentioned
bad
Montreal
luck
roads
for a lot
on
of
here a
people.
lot.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, some people just seem to be unlucky, but maybe they're not checking their tire pressure. As you said, there's a lot of different variables. I mean, myself too. I've been with Apollo for a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I've never gotten a flat tire.
Yeah,
You guys clearly see me riding the scooters a lot. I've
yeah,
taken the Phantom, off roading and done some dangerous things with it that
hmm
you shouldn't
yeah,
be doing. And I don't know. I still haven't gotten a puncture either. It's
yeah.
yeah. It depends on a lot of
What
different things, I guess.
what a privilege you have to be able to do those things.
Privilege, risking my life. It depends how you frame it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I guess this is a good segue then to talk about the different kinds of tires that are out there.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned, like ours are pneumatic, but there's actually
Yeah.
even different kinds of pneumatic tires too, right?
Yeah. So to break it down, into different categories, the two biggest ways to split up tires is pneumatic and solid, right? So
Hmm.
air filled is basically what pneumatic means,
Yeah.
and then solid. So in pneumatic tires, there are basically two different types in that subset itself. The first being with the inner tube, and the other being tubeless, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
the tube tires, like the inner tube, are what you commonly see in bikes and most electric scooters. I think it's the most common type of tire.
Hmm.
The tubeless tires are what are installed in your cars,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
some premium electric scooter brands might have solid tubeless tires, and that's basically because they have advantages, but the one thing they come with almost always is they're a lot more expensive, um,
Mm.
and it's not always worth it. So the tubeless tire will be more resistant to flats, but not
Okay.
immune to flats. It's not
Right.
perfect, right?
It's still air
Um,
filled. Yeah.
it's still air filled, and it still has a chance to break down and leave you in a bad spot. And the
Yeah.
problem there is that the tubeless tires are a lot harder to change. They are honestly
Really.
a pain. They are a big pain to
Okay.
change. Whereas the tube tires, you blow one, there. If you have your set of Allen keys, it's honestly really
Hmm.
easy to change a
Hmm.
flat tire. Like if you have your tools, it's not hard at all. Whereas the tube ones, you need pry bars. You're probably going to scratch your motors.
Yeah.
You need to have something to force it against. You might need a second person. That's sort of why we lean away from the tubeless tires.
Okay.
We just don't feel that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks, um, especially with the cost. Like I said, it's
Yeah.
more than double for most cases to get a
Really.
tubeless
Wow.
tire compared to an inner tube and a regular tire,
So it sounds like it's
pneumatic
pretty
tire.
comparable to changing the tires on your car. And I mean, most
Yeah,
people go to the
like
shop to get their tires changed too.
exactly. Like if you've ever seen tires change on a car, they have a special machine to fit them on the
Yeah.
rim. And, usually tire change season, they have a few guys doing just that because it's such a big job. It's a pain, and we want these scooters to be easy to work on yourselves, right? We're always trying to put videos out there to teach people how to do maintenance and just general checks on their scooters so that they can be riding at the top level of efficiency and just general safety too at all times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we talked about tubed and tubeless pneumatic tires, and the other big category they mentioned is solid, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a solid rubber tire. What are some of the pros and cons of each one, I guess, pneumatic and solid?
So the solid are great for, you don't have to worry about flats.
Of course.
It's pretty simple. You cannot get a flat on a solid tire because it is solid, right? It is solid rubber. If you poke a snail through it, it's still going to work just fine. That comes at the cost of comfort and just what I call rideability. So a solid tire, you're going to feel every small little bump and groove in the road. If you're going along a sidewalk, you're going to feel the chunk, 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 chunk. And after a while, you're going to feel it in your knees. You're going to feel it in your hands holding the handlebar. And it's really just not comfortable for long rides. Like it really makes you not want to use your scooter. Of course, some people, after they get a few flats in their first season riding a scooter, say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Can we get a solid tire on this?" Yes, in most cases, you can put a solid tire on what was a tubed pneumatic tire.
Okay, so those are swappable. Okay,
those are swappable one way. To put a pneumatic tire on a solid tire, that is usually not advisable, just because of the way the solid rubber fixes into the rim of the scooters.
Okay.
They're just not usually the same design. Whereas there are often solid tires that are made to fit into the pneumatic tire, right?
I see.
Where the
So if a scooter comes standard with a solid tire, you can't usually change it to pneumatic, but if a scooter comes standard with a pneumatic tire, you can most likely change it to a solid.
Yes, exactly. So like, for example, we used to sell the Mercane Wide Wheel Pro. You cannot fit a pneumatic tire on those wheels. It's impossible. Whereas, I have personally had someone with an Explorer come in and say, "Hey, my son's getting a lot of flat tires. I think he's riding, over, grass and who knows what. Can we install solid tires?" Like, yes, we have some solid tires we can put in. And then it works, right? It works for what they're trying to accomplish. The other category of solid tires, of course, they call them honeycomb tires. I honestly don't even really consider them to be a different type of tire, because they're just a better design of the solid tire, where they'll give a little bit more cushion, so you won't feel quite as much of the every bump, but you still will feel it, and it's still not very comfortable for long rides.
And even with the honeycomb, there's like two types, right? There's the pure solid honeycomb with just like dimples, I guess, in the sides, and there's the other that are actually, I don't know how you call it, air filled maybe, where
there are some that have like almost like a cavity of air, or like a chamber of air inside, right?
Proper honeycomb, I guess.
Or there are honeycombs where it's not even segmented. It's literally just like, it looks like someone stuck their Allen key right through it, and it's just that through the tire. And those are just to give the rubber more malleability and give it some more ability to bend and give to what the road is offering you. So they're good if you are finding you're getting lots of flats for whatever reason, and you have been checking your PSI and making sure your tires are inflated properly. If you're still finding yourself getting lots of flats, maybe then you might want to consider replacing your pneumatic tires for solid tires. But for the most part, I recommend pneumatic tubed tires for 95% of electric scooter riders.
Yeah. So, I guess pneumatic tires they're more efficient, a little bit easier, more comfortable to ride, especially if your scooter doesn't have suspension either. It almost acts as a dampener, a softener while you're riding.
It really is. Because the air, obviously
cushions you.
It cushions you. It is literally suspension on it's like the first layer of suspension for any pneumatic tire equipped scooter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the
Another
best
cause,
layer, but it is a type of.
yeah. Another thing too, I don't know if you mentioned this, but another leading cause of punctures, I think, is when people they change their tires, their tubes, and they get the tube stuck between the rims, right?
That is a big problem for many people. I think
Okay.
I haven't seen as many lately. I know I saw a few when I first started back
Mm-hmm.
last summer, but I think people have started to wise up a bit. Maybe we've put out enough information, some
Hopefully.
material. I know other companies have as well.
Yeah.
That's mostly, and really that can just be avoided by properly changing your tubes. And the trick there is just that you need to partially inflate them when
Mm-hmm.
you're installing it. That will give you clearance, because if you put an inner tube in here, you're going to see it hanging, sticking out of the edges,
Yeah.
this. You need to partially inflate it, not fully inflate it, just partially.
Right.
Typically what I do is I will pump up the inner tube inside after I put it inside the tire, pump it up, and then when I loosen the valve, air will sneak out, but I don't force any more air out. I just let whatever air
Mm.
naturally falls out of the inner tube. That's typically good enough, right? Then you can
Okay.
tuck it away inside, and you should be able to see, you'll see one side of your rim here, and you should see the metal ring all the way around. And if you can see that, and then there's no inner tube blocking it, make it, close it, and you should be good. It's really not that
Mm-hmm.
hard. And then you'll inflate it. You should know right away whether or not you did it successfully or not. If
Mm-hmm.
you break your inner tube from the split rims, then you won't go as far as riding it to find out. It should be very obvious when you try to inflate the tire. You go, hey, this thing's only getting 6 psi, and I've been inflating it for 10 minutes. What's wrong? What's wrong is your inner tube is broken, unfortunately.
Yeah. Might
Um,
want to change that.
yeah.
So there's also a third category of tires, isn't there? There's self-healing, right?
So yeah, it's a kind of an emerging technology. We've been keeping our eye on different brands and different companies doing this, and it's really exciting, to be honest. Knowing that a lot of people's biggest frustrations with their electric scooters are flat tires, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not something we have so much control as sellers of the scooters, right? It's more about
Yeah.
riding and the users. So the self-healing tires it's basically the idea of there's a thin membrane inside the tire before, yeah, and actually I'm not sure if I think they're tubeless. Um,
I think so.
yeah, but there's a thin membrane, and basically what happens is when that gets pierced, there's almost like a goo or a gel that comes
Okay.
out, and then it seals the tire as if it were tire sealant, like kind of built in to the wheel.
Ah.
So what that will do is, it basically gives you an extra life. Like if you were playing
Mhm.
Mario, you got an extra life. You hit a piece of glass with your tire,
Yeah.
no problem. You just you start again.
You hit a
If you were
Goomba
to
as
hit
a Mario.
another piece of glass in the exact same spot, then I think that might be the problem. The odds of that
Yeah.
happening are very, very small,
Yeah.
just due to the fact that there's the whole tire that you could hit and
Hmm.
all that. So we're really excited. Hopefully, we can get some and supply them to our customers, because I know
Okay.
lots of people would be happy with that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that itself is out of my hands, but I know the big bosses are looking at that sort of technology.
Ah, okay. So yeah, I guess as you said, it kind of works like adding tire sealant. Would you recommend people use tire sealant then? It seems to be kind of a hotly debated topic among a lot of scooter riders.
I would recommend using tire sealant if you're having a problem with flat tires. I
Hmm.
don't recommend, if you just bought a new electric scooter and it's your first one, some guy on a forum says, "Oh, make sure you use slime."
Hmm.
Maybe see if you have a problem with fats first, because what that slime will do, especially if you don't install it correctly, is it will throw off the balance of the tire, and so one side will be heavier than the other. And while that won't cause any immediate problems, over time that can cause
Yeah.
abnormal wear and tear on your scooter, which leads to nothing good.
Hmm. Is there a better way for people to install tire sealant for the ones that want to keep it in and don't want that imbalance?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a better way, but there is a proper way, and lots of people
Mm-hmm.
don't know the proper way. So
Okay.
the tire sealant, if you're installing it in your pneumatic tires, it goes inside the tube. It does not go outside of the tube, in between the tube and the tire. It goes inside the tube. So with most, I know we stocked Armadillo's tire
Yeah.
sealant, and it came with a small tool that you could remove the valve from your inner tube, right? So what normally stops the air from coming out, and it's a little metal stick, and you push it in and it lets air out. So you would be able to remove that, and it's just now you just have the inlet, the metal tube. Stick your bottle of slime in there, spin the wheel as you're slowly putting the slime in, and make sure you keep spinning it for a good 5 or 10 minutes, just to make sure the slime is evenly coated around the inner tube.
Right.
Because when people just maybe say they just leave their tire here, fill it with inner tube, then the bottom half is filled with slime. This has none. And every time you ride, it's like going on a ride at Disney World. You're going, oh.
When your washing machine is loaded, improperly, it's
Yes,
bouncing
exactly.
around.
Exactly.
Because people are always asking. I see online people are always asking if they should add tire sealant or not, and it can be a good peace of mind, but it's not 100%.
No.
100% effective anyway.
No, there's no 100% solution when you're using pneumatic tires, right? It's just sort of a fact that flats are possible, right? There's no such thing as a 100% perfect design of really anything, and tires are no different. So it helps. It's another layer of protection, but it could come at the cost of some balance, some long-term reliability. That's why I'd recommend waiting until you see if you have problems with flats, because I'd say 3/4 of scooter riders don't have problems with flats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's transition to different types of tires, but not pneumatic or solid, but more like the tread type or even sizes of tires, because there's a variety of different sizes, not even just for the width and diameter, but also obviously for your rim diameter and different treads. And you see like off-road tires, winter tires, street tires. Can you talk about some of the differences and different types there?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. I think something like this is pretty intuitive, where when we talk about tread, what we're talking about is sort of the groove in the tire here, right? How deep is it cut in? And it's fun to think about like race cars, like F1 driving. I'm not into this at all, but when you look at those tires, right, they're perfectly smooth. There's no tread on those, and that's because they're riding on a perfectly smooth manicured track, right? They don't have to worry about things like potholes and rough asphalt.
It's much
So they
smoother
get
rubber too. It's for
right,
more traction.
exactly, right. So
Or
typically,
softer rubber, I mean, sorry.
when you have less tread, you will get more grab and more power out of your scooters, but only when you're riding on super flat roads that are meant to handle that sort of thing.
Right.
So with this tread, I would call just as your standard road tread for most North American or European roads. Like, this is good. This is all you need, right?
Yeah.
This
That's like a
can handle
standard street tire, I guess. Right?
Yeah, right. This will also do light gravel. I wouldn't go on any long rides with gravel, but maybe if there's a short section of your commute home or something where you do a kilometer on a pretty fine grain hard gravel, then it's no problem. And then obviously when you see winter tires, the tread is a lot thicker, right? Because it needs to dig into the snow in order to kind of grab it and push you forward.
Now, to clarify, we don't recommend riding your scooter in the snow because they are
We
not
do not
waterproof.
recommend riding your scooter in the snow. It is, because obviously snow is water and the scooters are not waterproof. The other problem too with salt is the other big thing. The salt conducts electricity, and so if you get a tiny piece of salt stuck into your scooter, you could fry your battery and controller, and then that's not cheap to replace. So again, not advising driving in winter, but even if you were to say driving in, muddy conditions, again, not
Hmm.
recommended. Mud has water in it,
Yeah.
but that's when you would want a thicker tire. I know there are some of our customers who do ride, who do go off roading, despite our recommendations, and they want the winter tire set just because it
Hmm.
can get them more grip on rough terrain or uneven terrain, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's really the difference is what are you riding on?
Okay.
Mhm,
So yeah, you have to consider your riding conditions, the what you're going to be using the scooter for. Mostly is going to be joy
mhm.
riding for fun on the weekends or commuting, and stuff like that. Do you do you think people should be changing their tires depending on what they're riding for? Like, do you want to be swapping it very often?
I mean, if you have the tools and the space to swap your tires, and you want to take your scooter on, as many different places as you can take it, by all
Hmm.
means, swap your tires. There's no harm to your scooter if you're installing it properly. There's no damage done. You can
Hmm.
swap them back and forth. You can try different ones you like, maybe some other brands just for slight
Hmm.
differences. Um, but I don't think most scooter riders need to do that. I think for most people, just the tires that come on the scooter are fine
Yeah.
unless you are planning on exclusively taking it. Maybe you have, a huge property somewhere in Montana and, you just want to ride it out on the grass and the gravel, like
That's the dream.
maybe get some more heavy duty tires, and
Hmm.
stick with them, right? But for the most part, stick with what you got unless you are
Yeah.
keen to try different kinds and you are enthusiastic about taking your scooter as many different places as you possibly can.
Hmm. And yeah, well, we'll transition there. You mentioned like other brands too, and some people have asked us why we don't maybe use higher quality tubes or tires, and I think we've kind of cleared it up here. It's not necessarily the quality of the tires, but do we have any other brand recommendations out there? I know there's one specifically called PMT, and some people have asked us why PMT tires are not standard.
Uh, PMT tires are not standard for us just due to the price point. They're great tires. They are. I can't say
Hmm.
anything bad about them, right? They're great tires. Um,
But the price point too.
but the price point is kind of ridiculous, right? Your return on investment is you know they are better, but are they that
Hmm.
much better that it's worth the price difference?
Hmm.
Probably
Yeah.
not. Like I said, the tires that come with our scooters are good enough for 90-95% of users,
Hmm.
um, right? Like both of us have driven for many
Never
times
had a
and
flat.
not
Yeah.
had a flat, right? Um, so while there are like PMT is good, there are other suppliers that you could find, but really for electric scooters, you don't you won't notice a huge difference in quality between
Hmm.
one brand from another if the specs are the same, right?
Right.
Um, and if you are a super enthusiast and you are pushing your Phantom at third speed at maximum speed all the time, and that
Yeah.
0.01 of a meter stopping distance and that little bit of extra grip matters, then by all means, please do everything you can to keep yourself safe and get on
Yeah.
the road. But like I've said before, most people just don't need it.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
And if you're doing that kind of riding, I mean, that extends farther past the tires, and you should be, wearing full
Mhm.
safety gear and
Yeah,
a
that's when
full
you need a
face
full
helmet.
face
And
helmet, yeah,
yeah,
and probably shin pads and wrist guards and everything else, and check your local laws too, because probably
yeah,
not permitted.
also very important.
Mhm.
And I think another factor we haven't really touched on either is tire width too. I mean, some of our scooters they can only handle a certain width, but does the actual width of the tire make a difference, and in what way?
It does make a difference. Actually, that's one of the things you will. So the width and the diameter, right, the general size of the
Hmm.
scooter, are probably the two things you would notice the most if they were changed on your scooter, right? If everything else was
Right.
the same and those things changed, you would notice it. The diameter more so than the width, but the width is still important. So
Hmm.
typically, the skinnier your tire, the better time you're going to have kind of cornering, right? If you're
Okay.
leaning
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
turns, right? Because there's less rubbing and you're able to turn more. Whereas the wider your tire, the more comfortable you're going to be going keeping stable at a smooth speed, going straight. So it's really trying to find the best balance between those two things.
Okay.
Right. I mentioned the Mercane wide wheel before. I know, it's in the name. It's a wide-wheeled scooter.
Yeah.
When
We stopped
I
selling that, by the way, for
Right,
anyone
when I
not
I
sure.
know. And I'm glad we stopped selling them, frankly. Um, but if you have ever ridden that scooter, I know I have.
Mhm.
It's kind of awkward to take a steep turn, right?
Yeah,
If you're
it's
trying to
not
do a tight
conducive to
turn,
smooth turning.
right? You're kind of fighting it, and then you kind of have to push the handlebars in a way that
Yeah,
isn't very intuitive, and it feels almost unnatural when you're riding it, and you have to
yeah,
think too much. Whereas when you have a more standard 2.5 or 3-inch tire, or even a 2-inch tire, even
mm,
it's going to be a lot more natural, more like a bicycle when you're just kind of lean into the turn, you do it. You
yeah,
don't think about it a lot. You're not so much turning the handlebar to turn. It's more about leaning and then
yeah,
look where you're going, and your scooter goes there.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that Mercane, I think part of it too is how thin the tires were. They were wide and thin, and it was just not
yes,
conducive to smooth turning at all. It felt like it was more of a drag racer, wants to go fast and straight,
in
but
straight. Yeah, it's true.
turning was
Yeah, and there are other issues I have with that scooter, but that's not for today.
topic for another time. Um,
Hopefully never. But
yeah. These are all very good points, and people ask us all the time, like, what size of tire will fit on this scooter? What size of tire will fit on that scooter? I don't know if we really touched or went deep enough into the differences in diameter, though. Like, why do some of our scooters have 8.5-inch tires? Why do some of them have 10? And there's
so
even other sizes out there, too.
yeah, there is. Like, I mean, you can get scooters with a 13-inch tire. Those ones will run you lots and lots of money. Typically,
Mm,
you'll find the higher performance the scooter, the bigger the tires.
right.
Right, our Phantom and Ghost have 10-inch tires, and same with the Explorer. Whereas the City and the Airs have 10-inch tires too. One of the base has an 8.5-inch rear tire.
Right.
So there's a relationship between power that you have and the size tire. If you have very small diameter wheels on a very powerful scooter, you're just gonna minimize your efficiency essentially. So the bigger
Mm,
the tire, the faster you can go, because as the motor's turning, the wider the diameter, the more force, right? Just like if I have my arm like this and I move it at
mhm.
my elbow an inch, it's moving 3 or 4 inches at my fingers, right? So the wider the diameter, for every bit that the motor turns, you're getting more turning out of your wheel. I see you scratching your head, which means I'm going to try to explain that better.
No, I get it. It's just trying to, yeah. It's like when someone points out when you watch a record player, and you've got
Mhm.
the 2 points on it, the inner and the outer point, and the outer point, even though they're making the same revolutions per minute, the outer point is going faster. It's just trying
Yeah,
to wrap your head around that concept.
it's, mechanical engineering. It's 2 steps away from magic.
Yeah, hurts my head a little bit to think about that. Like I understand, kind of, but yeah.
hmm And
Um,
then the other thing,
yeah. Sorry, go
obviously,
ahead.
with larger diameter tires too, is you're higher off the ground,
Mm,
and ground clearance can matter for some people. The more ground clearance you have, the more give you can have with suspension. Although it doesn't, obviously, if you're not using an entire 6 inches you have off the ground entirely for suspension. But if you
mhm.
are only 2 inches away from the ground, you have that much less room to work with. So that's the other thing, right? The scooters with more serious suspension, like the Phantom, has bigger tires to allow some more give with it.
Okay, interesting. Is,
Hmm
is there any reason for like not making a smaller scooter with big tires? Take well, I mean, even though our Air Pro uses 10-inch tires on both
Yeah, the Air
the
Pro
City
uses
is at
10-inch
8.5.
tires. The City is
Yeah.
8.5. You know, I couldn't tell you exactly why there hasn't been a scooter like that, but I think it would just be the basics. Like, most people would agree that the bigger tires are better in diameter
Hmm.
anyway.
They just
Um,
roll over objects
they
more
they
easy.
they
It's
roll
more
they roll
comfortable. Yeah.
better, right? You go over, like you said, rough terrain a lot better. So why, if you're having a better, more powerful scooter, why would you want worse tires on it? Is
Mm,
really, I think, what it comes down to.
yeah.
Um, right? The more power you have in a scooter, the more places you want to take it, the more maneuverable you want it to be. So you're going to want those bigger tires.
So I guess it's something else for people to keep in mind and consider when they're purchasing a new scooter is, what kind of riding am I going to be using the scooter for? And so tire size kind of comes into that effect too. But a lot of variables on that, and even how tall or big of a person you might be too. If you're a smaller person, you don't necessarily need a 10-inch tire on a big scooter.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest consideration I think anyone should take before purchasing a scooter is, what am I planning to use the scooter for? Is this for fun and excitement? Is this just to commute so I can get to work faster? Or is this just, my son wanted an electric scooter, so I got one too, so I can go for rides with him. Right. That's always the biggest factor when making a scooter purchase.
Of course. All right. Well, we've managed to talk about tires for almost 40 minutes, I think. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up? Any tips you want to share, or?
No big tips. I will say I'd recommend people get used to, before going on a ride with a scooter, just push in your tires and feel it, right? I'm not going to tell people to actually get out a PSI gauge or a pump every time they go for a ride, because that's ridiculous, right? We don't want to do that. But what we want to do is just gain knowledge, right? Know what your tires feel like at 50 PSI.
Okay.
Our scooters, all of them are pretty hard to press in at 50 PSI. That's a lot. Most car tires are only between 30 and 36 PSI, right?
Okay.
So it is quite a bit. It's hard to push in. And that way, once you know what it is, when you go for a ride, sometime maybe you went on vacation and you come back after a few weeks and you feel it and you say, oh, this has a little bit more give to it. That's when it's time you should fill up your tires, right? And then that will help prevent flats and keep you on the road for longer.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I guess if it has any give to it when you're trying to squeeze, that's a good time to inflate it then.
Yes, exactly. That's the best time. That's when you know, right? We recommend 50 PSI. Realistically, you can ride the tires at 45 PSI, right? I know some people say they really like them at 52. Honestly, I don't think I could tell you the difference between 50 and 52 if I were riding a scooter. But once you just know that this feels a little bit softer, that's when you should fill it up. And getting used to sort of doing a quick little inspection like that. Okay, feel the tires. Make sure the brakes stop before every time you go for a ride, just for 30 seconds. That will help you maintain your scooter better. And so you'll be more aware of when the tires are getting a little low or when the brakes are starting to wear a bit and you might need to think about changing the pads. And that's what we want, right? We want people to enjoy the scooters and ride them as much as possible.
And safely too. All right. Well, this has been very informative. I hope everyone listening and watching has enjoyed this and found it to be informative as well. I guess to summarize what we've talked about, there's pneumatic tires, solid tires, and maybe in the future, self-healing tires. Pneumatic tires obviously being the most common and the most all-around effective, I guess, for most people, but you're more prone to flats, although you do have a better riding experience. Solid tires, never have to change any flats, but you will feel every bump in the road. Maybe if you live somewhere like New York City or even Montreal, it might be something you want to consider, especially if you don't really care about the extra cushioning. And self-healing tires, hopefully we'll see them soon. Later on,
I hope so.
We'll see. But if you guys have any other questions about tires, anything else that you want to see us talk about on this podcast, leave a comment below. And we hope you guys keep on rolling. Thanks for watching, guys, and ride safe.